I've just started the recording, so just so that you know, this session is going to be recorded. You will be getting a copy of the recording link as well as a copy of the slides, probably within the next day or two. I usually send that out with a survey that I really appreciate if you take a couple of minutes to fill out, because it gives me the feedback that I need as far as how are we doing and what are some of the other topics that you might like to hear about. So we have Anita joining us today. Anita, if you want to give a little wave, she's going to be monitoring the
Morning.
Q&A. We have I've set this up as a meeting so that you are able to unmute yourself. And if at any point you have questions, I do like to make this as interactive as possible. So you have two options. You can always type questions into the Q&A, which Anita is going to be monitoring, or feel free to unmute yourself and just ask a question. I like to pretend that we're all standing in the same room together. It's also helpful to me, if you are so inclined, to turn your camera on, because it really does help if I can see faces. So I don't care if you're eating breakfast. I don't care if you're drinking your coffee. Feel free to go ahead and turn that camera on. So let's get going. I always give my little legal disclaimer. I don't think we're going to be touching on anything that kind of dips into that legal realm here, but just in case, I always like to let everybody know I'm not an employment attorney. So you can't rely on anything that I say as legal advice. But again, we're going to be focusing on recruiting. So not getting into that legal realm too much today. The three main topics regarding recruitment that we're going to talk about today. We're going to go over what some of the challenges are, because I think you're probably all experiencing difficulty in finding candidates. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to focus a lot on actually rethinking what the recruitment role is, and the role of being a strategic business partner and of recruiting proactively as opposed to transactionally. We'll talk about that. And then I also want to talk about what are some of the components of a successful talent acquisition strategy. How do you set your organization aside as an employer so that the people that you would like to have come work for you know who you are, know about you, and you stand out from the crowd? So I am going to launch a poll here, because I always like to see who my audience is. We do have a diverse group of clients. Some of you might be a recruiter in a larger organization. Others of you might just put that recruiting hat on from time to time. So I kind of like to see who I'm talking to, so then I can gear our conversations a little bit better. So I'm seeing here, no surprise, that most of you do all things HR, including recruiting. There are very few organizations in Vermont where you actually have a recruiting team and that's all they do is recruit. So this is not surprising at all. And we also have quite a few people who are doing HR, but that's not your primary role. But recruitment probably does fall within that scope. So I'm not at all surprised, but thank you very much, because this actually helps me out quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit about what's involved in recruiting in today's market. As you can see, it's been a tough one the last couple of years. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are 11 million jobs open in the US right now. That's a lot of jobs. And according to LinkedIn, there are actually 1.9 jobs for every person in the labor market. And that's why you're probably experiencing some difficulty getting some of these positions filled. There actually is a talent shortage. We're also experiencing a lot of inflation. And why inflation leads to high turnover? Well, unless you are collecting Social Security, where you get a standard cost of living increase, you're probably finding that salary increases in your organization are not keeping up with inflation. So you've got employees out there that are saying, well, if I'm only going to be getting a 2 or 3% salary increase, if I want my salary to keep up, I might need to make a job change. So there are a lot more out there that are looking to make a move because they want to make that next salary jump. There's also been a lot of demographic shifting, particularly since COVID. You're seeing the baby boomers starting to leave the work, continuing actually to leave the workforce. The younger candidates that are coming in have a different set of expectations for their jobs, for their employers. They're viewing their job not just as something that I do 40 hours a week, but they're looking at it for something that's going to give them some fulfillment, give them some purpose. That's kind of a different mindset than the people that we've seen leaving the workforce because they're retiring. And then there's that desire for that flexible and remote work. And that's a really big piece. We've all gotten kind of accustomed to working remotely unless we are in one of these roles where we're facing customers every day and we really can't work remotely. We've gotten used to that flexibility to be able to work from home or work from almost anywhere. And that's kind of baked into what people are looking for nowadays. It's kind of an expectation that they're not going to need to be in the office 5 days a week. And take a look at this statistic, which is a little bit scary. 61% of US employees are considering handing in their resignations in 2023. That's big. And what that says to me too is that recruitment isn't just finding new employees to come in and fill your jobs. It's also about hanging on to the ones that you have, because you don't want to take a look at your workforce and think 61% of them is actually looking to leave. So when you're thinking recruitment, always be thinking retention. Be thinking about what can I do for my employees to make sure that they're getting out of their job what they're expecting, that we are giving them all that we possibly can as an employer. So, there's always two sides to HR, right? There's the recruitment, there's the retention. Retention is a big piece of it. Some of the trends, I think flexibility and remote work is probably one of the biggest trends and one of the areas where candidates are continuing to have that bargaining power. I've got a good friend who works for a large pharmaceutical company. She's in IT. They're telling them they need to be in the office 3 days a week. She can't fill her open positions. She says every single candidate she talks to says, there's no reason for me to be in the office 3 days a week. I've been working remotely 5 days a week now for over 3 years, and I'm collaborating with my team via video calls, and there's absolutely no reason for me to be fighting traffic because they're in a major metropolitan area. Why should I be fighting traffic to get into the office just so I can see people face to face? So that's kind of the mentality. And it's not just the remote work, it's the flexibility. So the flexibility of, I really can only work during the school hours. So I'm going to go find a job that's going to allow me to do that. And that's what candidates are looking for. And they're going to go to places where they can get it. Upskilling is a big thing, that your workers don't want to be stuck in a stagnant position. They always want to be learning. They want to know that there's a career path for them. They don't want to be stuck doing the same old thing. So again, you as an organization need to be taking a look at, who do I have on staff? What do they want? What do they want to do? What do they want to learn? How can I help them to get there? DEIB, that's the buzzword for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And that's huge. You've got candidates out there that are looking for organizations that have commitments to DEIB. And it's up to you as an organization to make sure that whatever initiatives you have going on in your organization is well publicized so that people are aware of it, not just within your organization, but your candidates outside of the organization know what's going on. And total rewards strategy and pay transparency. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. What total rewards is referring to is what you're giving to your employees other than a salary. What are you giving them regarding their benefits, their time off, their educational opportunities, tuition reimbursement, maybe student loan repayments. What are you offering to them other than their actual base salary? And pay transparency, we're going to talk a little bit about that later on as well. It's a trend. It's not going away anytime soon, and it is definitely something that candidates are looking for and expecting out of organizations. So if you want, just take a few minutes to type into the chat. What do you think your organization's greatest challenge is? What are we thinking? Anybody want to share something here? Locating qualified candidates. Okay. Anybody else? Pay scales. Yep. And we will talk about that a little bit more. Finding production level candidates. Yeah. Entry level candidates are really hard to find, and getting candidates to even apply. And expected pay. Yeah. And competing with salaries, because like I said, inflation is there, and people are leaving so that they can get the salary that they think is keeping up with inflation. People wanting to work a 40-hour work week, right? And that's where that flexibility might come in. Maybe there's a way that you can accommodate less than a 40-hour work week. Yeah, and they don't want to stay once they learn the ropes, and that's the retention piece. So, hopefully, maybe we can talk a little bit about that as we're going through this as well. All right, thanks everybody. So as you can see, you're probably looking at some of these reasons and thinking, yeah, that's what we've seen too. So you're not alone. Some of the challenges in recruiting could be in the people that you have doing the recruiter capacity. Again, we're not large organizations here in Vermont. We rarely have a company that has an actual recruiting department where you've got dedicated people that are doing nothing but recruiting. And as you know, most of you are wearing a lot of different HR hats. And some of you are doing a lot of other responsibilities in addition to HR. So you don't necessarily have recruitment strategy experience, and you shouldn't be expected to have it. But hopefully we can give you a couple of hints today that might kind of point you in that direction of how you can become a little bit more strategic with the recruitment responsibilities that you do have. There were definitely process challenges, because they're particularly smaller organizations. You probably don't really have a process other than somebody comes to me and says, I have an opening. So they give me a job description and I go out and I post it on Indeed, right? That might be the only process that you have in place. You might not have technology that's tracking applicants, that's responding to applicants, that's tracking them so that if you have a similar position down the line, you can go back and see who might have applied for a position 3 or 4 months ago that wasn't a good fit for this job, but might be a good fit for the next job that comes up. You might actually have an applicant tracking system that's part of your payroll system. Sometimes it's a paid add-on, but it might be something to look into if you're hiring more than a couple of people a year. Check with your payroll provider, see what they've got as far as an applicant tracking system, and what can you put into place as far as processing so that you can get rid of some of the inefficient processes, or you can actually develop processes that you don't have right now. And planning can be a challenge. What do you do once you actually make a job offer? How do you onboard them? And again, how do you retain them once they're there? That's, again, part of the recruitment process. And another area of planning is basically accepting the idea that you're going to have to adapt strategies on the fly, because things change. They change all the time. So you have to understand that, okay, I'm going to put some plans into place here. This is what we're going to try to do, but you might have to shift gears as you go. So always bear in mind that you're going to have to be able to adapt along the way. One of the primary takeaways that I want you to get out of today is that recruiting is really more than a transaction. And what do I mean by that? By transactional, I mean, you've got a job opening. You've got a manager in your organization that comes to you. There may or may not be a job description, and they say, go ahead and get this posted. And you go to on Indeed or some other job board, you post the position, and then you sit back and you wait for candidates. That doesn't work in today's environment. So what we're going to explore today is going beyond that to start thinking bigger picture. And this can be an organizational challenge, because you might have a leadership team that really doesn't want to get involved in recruitment. They just want you to take care of it and you to give them the good candidates. And then when you can't find candidates, everybody throws their hands up and says, how come I can't find anybody? Right? So we're trying to get you to think outside of that box, rethink the recruitment function a little bit. And we're not going to talk about, well, what can I do during the interview process? What questions can I ask? We're going to talk bigger picture than that. We're going to talk strategy here. So rethinking that recruitment role, I think, is a really important piece. I'm going to try to put it into terms that Vermonters can relate to, right? A lot of organizations, what I see is you've got somebody that is, quote unquote, the recruiter, and they kind of work in their own silo. And then you've got everybody else over there working in the barn, right? So again, transactional. Somebody from the everyone else comes over with a job requisition or a job description and says, we need to hire somebody, or so-and-so just put in their resignation and we need to get that job filled, and we need to get it filled really, really quick. So go ahead and find us candidates. And again, that doesn't work too well. Everybody needs to be a part of this puzzle. So you as a recruiter need to start working with management. Management needs to work with you. You need to be working together to come up with a strategy that's going to work. And that's a little bit easier said than done if this is a shift for you in your organization. So how do you become more of a strategic partner? I think one of the things that you need to do is show the value that you can add to the recruitment process. Let your leadership team know that it's not just you that's doing the recruitment. You need to be adding value throughout the process. Take a look at some sources for actually looking into data. Has anybody ever had any exposure to LinkedIn's Talent Insights? Anyway, it's from LinkedIn, and it gives a whole bunch of data that helps with workforce planning. So I think it's something, it is a subscription, it is going to cost a little bit of money, but it's something to look into, because it can give you data that will help you to find the people that you need to find, understand the labor market a little bit better, understand who's out there, what talents are out there, and how you can best go about finding the people that have the skills that you need. What's the supply? What's versus what's the demand? What's our competition in the market? And if you have that information, you can be talking to your leadership team about that, so that it becomes more than just a transactional process of go out and try to find somebody. You can take data, and again, you can find it from Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can find it from sources that aren't necessarily going to cost you money. And you can take a look at, okay, what are we going to need going forward? Or are we just reacting, right? Do you envision that we're going to be needing this skill set and this skill set? If you do, I'm going to start gathering some information about how could I go about finding that talent? Is this talent that comes right out of college? What can I do to develop relationships with universities so that we can find people that have this talent? What do we have internally? And I think this is one of the big pieces that sometimes gets overlooked, is what do we have right here? Kind of goes hand in hand with that upskilling. You as HR can take the lead in saying, okay, part of what we do here is meeting regularly with people that are on your team to find out, how are they doing in their job? What do they like about working here? What are some of their challenges? What can we do to help them to build their skill set to get them to a level that they want to be at? Otherwise, they're going to be sitting there and saying, well, I've been here. I think I've learned all that I can learn, and it's time for me to move on. But if there's interactive discussion going on with the employees as far as what their expectations are, what do they want to learn, you can help them to get there. And maybe you'll find in 6 months or a year, you don't have to go to the outside. You've actually got somebody internally that you can start moving up that ladder. And I also see HR's role as being really important in taking a look at employees' soft skills versus technical skills. Sometimes I think management gets kind of caught up in, I'm going to promote the person that does that. I'm going to promote my best technician into a leadership role. And you might see this, say you've got a really good programmer, right? They're wonderful. They're so good at what they do. So now I'm going to make them a manager. They're going to have a technical staff reporting to them. But that person doesn't necessarily have the leadership skills that's required to be leading a team. So it's kind of up to you, I think, as HR to insert yourself a bit and talk to the managers about, how do I develop these people so that they can take on these leadership roles? What are their soft skills? Who has maybe not the strongest technical skills, but the soft skills to be moving into that next level, to be monitoring a team? I thought this was kind of interesting. This came from LinkedIn Learning. The most in-demand hard skills versus the most in-demand soft skills. And it's good to kind of take a look at this, because if these are things that you're looking for, you're going to have a lot of competition. So you're going to definitely need to step it up in finding these people, and in, basically broadcasting what you are as an organization and making yourselves an organization that people that have these skills are going to want to work for. And if you're identifying some gaps, right? If you've got employees that you know are really good technicians, but hey, their soft skills are lacking a bit, then I think it's up to you as HR to try to get those people's skills developed so that they can move into that next role. You might have your own internal learning management system. Some organizations do. If you don't, you all have access to Zywave. That's the HR database that we give to all of our clients. Zywave has a learning management system as part of it, or an LMS. Again, that's an HR term. Take a look at that, and it should be available to you. If you have questions on how to access it, let me know. But there are 15 to 20-minute little videos that address a lot of soft skills. They have safety trainings. I've talked about this before. Take a look at it. This might be a really good way to start developing some of those leadership skills among your current team members, so that they are seeing that career path, and they're seeing that you are dedicated to giving them the skills that they're going to need to be successful in your organization. And again, your managers aren't going to necessarily be taking a lead on that, but you can. I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about job descriptions, because they are really, really important in so many different aspects of HR. But first and foremost, I want to make sure that you have them. If you don't have them, I really do think that this needs to be a priority to develop them. And if you do have them, but you know that they never get looked at and they probably haven't been updated in years, now's the time. And again, this is another way that you as HR can show that you've got the skills to add some value to your leadership team. I also wanted to caution you against using the job description as a job posting and just putting that out there on Indeed. This is really interesting. I went to an HR session at the Vermont HR Association, and there was a recruiter there that if there was no other takeaway, what he was trying to hit home with is, when you're posting a job out there, you're not posting to attract candidates, you're posting to the algorithm. So you want to put buzzwords, keywords in your posting that's going to get you hits. The candidates are going to be searching, right? So easier said than done, I know, but there is a lot of information online about how to potentially do that. And if you just put your posting out there, it's not necessarily going to create hits when somebody is looking at a job board. They should be updated regularly, at least at the beginning of the recruitment process. I think it's really important to incorporate it into regular meetings with employees so that the employee is engaged in their own job description. The job description is a great way to start off that discussion of, what do you want to do here? What do you see as your future here? This is what your role is right now, but what would you like to see your role in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now? It's a really good conversation starter. And again, the job description, I think, should be shared during the interview process, not necessarily shared right up front as a job posting, but when you're talking to someone, share that job description with them. Be open with them, be transparent. This is what the job is. This is what it entails. Are you okay with this? Do you have any questions on it? Or what do you think that is a good fit for you in this? What might not be a great fit for you? What do you think would be some of your challenges in a role like this? Again, you're being transparent, and candidates want that now. They want as much transparency about your organization as they can get. So job descriptions, if they're not a priority, they absolutely should be. And you want your function as a recruiter, instead of being reactive, here's the new job opening, go out and find candidates. You want it to be proactive. Probably a little easier said than done, but you always want to be looking one step ahead. So this is a chart that I think kind of exemplifies going from good to great, right? If you want to be really good as a recruiter, you're going to be in your organization so that you can have you can be in an advisory role to them and not just an administrative role. You want to make sure that you are aligning and your recruitment goals are aligning with your company's mission and with their strategy. And you want to be aware of what their strategy is, right? If their strategy is going to be, we're going to take on more projects and we need more IT people to do that, you need to be aware of that so that you can start thinking ahead of, okay, where are these people going to come from? Can we find them here in Vermont? Do we need to go outside of Vermont to find them? Is this going to be a remote job? Is this going to be a local job? How are we going to manage this? Building relationships, not only internally, but externally. Build relationships if you know that you're going to have job opportunities for recent college graduates. Don't just go post it on UVM's job board. Start building relationships with their career services group. Start building relationships with different organizations within UVM. Maybe there are clubs out there. Investment clubs, if you're looking for finance people, how can you find those people and start building relationships with them? If you have a lot of entry-level production people, get to know your local high schools, get to know your local tech centers, get to know people at Community College of Vermont, so that when they have a student, they're thinking of you, right? They're thinking, hey, I know a good place for you to work. I think this has potential for you. Let me see if I can make a connection for you. So build those relationships. Leveraging data and market research. Again, as I mentioned before, with LinkedIn, where are we going to find these people? Maybe you're looking at opening up a job site in an area where these people just don't live, right? That could be a problem. Planning and identifying creative talent strategies, right? How do I go out there and how do I find these people? Where are we going to find these people? What organizations are we going to find them from? Are we going to use an outside recruiter? Maybe if you're one of those people that wears a lot of different hats and you've got an opening for a senior level person, you might want to think about getting a recruiter involved from the outside. Being a spokesperson for your employer brand. Who are we? What do we stand for? What are our DEIB initiatives? EVP is an abbreviation for employee value proposition. And what that basically means is, what value does an employer provide to its employees? What do we give to our employees other than a paycheck? Creating an exceptional candidate experience. I think sometimes this gets lost in the shuffle, and this goes back to developing a process that works, that's effective, that's efficient. You want your candidate to know from the second they hit the submit button with their resume that they're being listened to, that you're paying attention to them. They're not getting lost in the shuffle. They're not going through an extraordinarily long interview process, because you're going to lose them if that's the case. You want to give them as much attention as possible throughout the process. And navigating technology for process and for efficiency. Again, if you have some sort of an applicant tracking system, make sure that you're using it to the fullest capability. If you're in a small organization where you're only hiring a handful of people a year, you're definitely not going to need something like that. But if you do, take a look at what you've got and leverage it to the best of your ability. Again, I'm kind of the philosophy that great recruiters hire great people, because you are going to be able to find better people if you start following some of these processes. Building a talent pipeline, I think, is a really important piece. Again, you're planning for the future and not just for tomorrow. So you're thinking ahead of what do we have coming down the pike, and how are we going to start finding people now, thinking outside of the box. What are some of those relationships that I, as a recruiter, can start developing, so that in 2 or 3 months, when I know we're going to need to ramp up our recruitment, I'm going to be able to find these people, and I've already built these relationships, and it might make it a little bit easier to stand out because I've already developed some relationships. It also means taking a look at things like any candidate that you've talked to that maybe wasn't a very good fit for the job that they initially applied for. What might they be a fit for down the line? Is this a really good candidate? You just don't have the right opening for them. You don't have the money in your budget to go over staff. But think about reaching out to them from time to time and saying, you know what? We don't have a position for you yet, but I just want to let you know we've still got you in mind. That goes a long way. Building diverse talent communities. I've heard a lot of people that are involved in recruitment just saying, wow, that's really hard to do here in Vermont. But is it? Especially when you have remote work. And by diverse, it's not just ethnic diversity, it's also socioeconomic diversity, it's geographic diversity, it's people that come from different kinds of backgrounds. How do I find those? And again, for example, if you're recruiting entry-level college grads, it might involve, excuse me, doing more than just posting a job. Maybe they have an organization on campus that is specifically geared towards minority students. Well, how do you build relationships with the minority community at that particular university? Have you ever thought of building relationships with some of the historically Black universities and colleges? Those are options. And leveraging your brand and your social media. And we're going to talk about that a little bit down the line as well. Do we have any questions or any thoughts? Okay, all right.
I had a quick one, Susan. This is Michelle from the Family Place.
Hi, Michelle.
I wanted to, hello everybody. I wanted to know, I've just recently convinced my agency to pay for a subscription of Indeed. So I have the pay version of Indeed finally. I wanted to know, for other organizations, how do you guys struggle when your organization is very hesitant to pay the costs associated with marketing that job? And what tips do you have to kind of really help? I'm also struggling to get them to understand the need to pay the people with these soft skills the higher rate. And you brought up a bunch of really great points, and I'm going to use those to talk to my supervisor for sure. I just want to know what other people's experiences were dealing with, costs associated with the recruiting process.
Does anybody have anything they'd like to jump in with, particularly if
I
you're
can
a nonprofit?
share. Yeah, I can share the Indeed because we do the paid Indeed advertising. This is Deb from PT 360. But what I've found that you have to be really careful about now is Indeed has become very smart with blocking out personal emails and contact information, and they give you only 48 hours to respond to candidates that they give you. So we got a number of candidates, for instance, on Saturday. We came in on Monday and we had already been charged I don't know if it was 26 or 46 per candidate. We were already charged all these
So you're doing
people.
the sponsoring, right? That's the sponsoring of the job part.
You have to be very careful with that, because once that 48 hours is up, they automatically charge your card, and that starts to get very, very expensive.
Yeah, I know we have sponsored. So in the past, we had sponsored jobs. This is, I just paid for the resume search, for this one, and I get about 20 contacts, which I wish we got a bit more contacts, but I will say, you know, the quality of the candidates and especially what we're looking for within human services and having those specialties, you know, it's been much easier to find it amongst the people who are currently working and are more passive candidates.
Yeah, that's what we found too.
Yeah.
Interesting. Does anybody else have any other thoughts or other hints to pass along?
Has anyone used Idealist? We're also looking at Idealist because they say that they focus on not-for-profits. However, it's a bit of a price. It's about $105 for 30 days of a posted job, you know?
Yeah. All right. I guess not.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. See, this is the kind of discussion I like to get going. I like to see you all helping each other. So we've already talked about some of these issues and some of the key components to actually having a successful recruitment strategy. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that employer branding, that candidate experience, some of the data analytics. But in the meantime, if you can just enter into the chat, you know, where do you see your recruitment strategy as having the highest opportunity for further development? Anybody want to share that in the chat for people to see? You know, I have
My
just
hand was
seen
raised before. I just wanted to make a point about DEI, and I put a resource in the chat for folks. So sorry you didn't see my hand raised before.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's
And
okay.
I actually just saw your comment about the abundant sun.
Yes.
Your comment? Okay, so go ahead.
No,
Share.
that's okay. It's just a resource.
Okay.
I know now we're on to a different topic. Thanks.
Yeah, no, but Abundant Sun, I know they've spoken to the Vermont HR Association before as a group in one of our meetings. Excellent. Really, really good source for some DEIB training for your organization. And sometimes I think it's just a matter of kind of getting that started. And, you know, we could be talking the whole session about DEIB initiatives. So I'm not going to go there, but it's something that candidates are looking for. They're just expecting that to be baked into your culture. So let's see. Oh, I do have somebody who used Idealist sometimes. So hopefully, Michelle, that might help for you a little bit. Okay. Good. This is helpful. And yeah, I can see a challenge with recruiting, understanding that it takes time to find people. Because again, you have to be an active recruiter. You can't just sit back and wait for the candidates to come to you. You need to be looking and you need to be working to make your organization and publicize what your organization is so that you can be more attractive to candidates. So yeah, all really good comments. Thanks. So we're going to talk a little bit about doing that right now, your employer brand. A strong employer brand can reduce turnover by 28% and cost per hire by 50%. So again, it's something that in the long run is a very cost-effective approach, right? How do we get who we are and what we are out there to our potential candidate pools? So a really important process to try to go through. So I think sometimes what you, again, as an HR person should do is take a look at, who are we, right? And what are we trying to tell to our applicants about us and about who we are? And I'm not just talking about what we do for our customers, but who are we as an organization to work for, so that you can find people who would be attracted to whatever it is that you have to offer. And I'm not talking about selling something that you're not, because that's going to backfire on you. If you are telling them that you are something and they come in the door and 3 months later, they realize this was totally misrepresented, this organization isn't what they said they were, it's not going to do anybody any good. That person's going to be out the door. But developing what is your brand, and if you don't have a brand, and if you don't have something that you think is important for your employees in order to retain them, then you've probably got a lot of work to do. For the most part, I think you probably do have value to offer to your employees. You just might not be really good at getting that word out there to the community and to your candidate pools. Whatever you are as an organization should inspire candidates to say, hey, you know what? I think I'd really like to work there. Candidates are going to take time to find out who you are. They're going to look, they're not just going to get on your website and say, oh, they make widgets. I think I'd like to work for a company that makes widgets. They're going to do searching. They're going to get online. They're going to find out, who are you? What have you done? What have you done within the community? What is it that you do that resonates with them? They're going to take the time to do that. So, we can talk a little bit about things like your website, that sort of thing. I think it's all part of it. It's all part of that bigger picture. But, how do you get started in doing that? I think, first of all, involving a leadership team is probably a really important thing, to ask them some of these questions. Who are we? What do we do well? What do our employees like about working for us? It can be really, really effective. It can be effective to be doing employee engagement surveys and finding out, what do your employees like about working here? Because that's what you're going to want to focus in on. Nobody knows better than your own employees what's really good about working for you, right? Take a look at what your online presence is. Have you ever just Googled your organization and seen what popped up? Take a look at your website, and is it really representative of who you are and what you are? Do you have stock photos, or do you have photos of your actual employees out there doing what they do? Do you talk about, if you have an internship program, do you talk about that on your website if you have interns? Do you talk about not just, we have an internship program, but what do our interns do? What are the projects that they're working on? Or what are some of the projects that our people here are working on? And what makes it really exciting? Talk about that online. Testimonials. Go to some of your employees and see if you can get a quote from them, and put their picture up there and put a quote on there about what they like about their work there. It goes a long way. Take a look at, what social media channels are going to work for your target audience. Is it going to be LinkedIn? If you've got a younger demographic, they probably could care less about what your presence on Facebook is, right? Because they're just never going to be on Facebook. What works? Your careers portal on your website. Look at it from the perspective of a candidate. Is it easy to use? Is it user-friendly? Does it give them the information that they need? Or is it just a button where you upload your resume? What really is that candidate experience? I think it's important to kind of take it from their viewpoint and say, okay, if I were to go on and apply for a job at this organization, what do I have to go through to do it? And if it's difficult to use, the second things get hard, they're going to say, forget it, I'm not doing this. For example, say you have an online job application. I wouldn't recommend that you have potential employees filling out an entire job application. It depends on the job, but I would save the application for once you've done a pre-screening and you've actually got a live candidate, then maybe have them fill out that job application. But if you ask them up front to fill out a 2 or 3 page job application, chances are they're just going to scroll on to the next job. They're not even going to stop and bother. You know, if to the best of your ability, because I know some of you are more sophisticated with your systems and your applicant tracking systems than others. But if you do have an applicant tracking system, the more that you can integrate with that, the better, because it'll make it less time consuming for you as a recruiter. And it will make the process go much more smoothly. And I'll just give you an example. If you have applicants, once they are into your system, they're viable applicants, they're providing you with information. Does that information move over to your HR system? If it does, it's one less step and one less piece of information that they're going to have to give you as they're being onboarded. It just seamlessly passes over and it makes it easier for everybody. You know, decide what you have to offer, that EVP, the employer value proposition. What do you want to highlight to your candidates? And how do you want to highlight that? How do you want to get that word out there? And again, these aren't decisions that you should be making. If you're a solo HR practitioner, this shouldn't all fall on you. This is something that you should be dealing with your leadership team, with your line employees on. Get everybody involved in the process. The more involved they are, you can also rely on your employees to be promoting your organization on their own LinkedIn pages. You know, what do they have to say about working for you? If they have a job opening on their team, ask them if they can post that out on their own LinkedIn page. Hey, I'm looking for somebody that has this kind of a background. I really enjoyed working here. I think you should apply. Get the word out there. 63% of job seekers will likely reject a job offer because of a bad candidate experience. So you have to think of recruitment as starting immediately when somebody hits the send button with a resume, right? Because you want to make sure that it's a seamless experience and that they are feeling welcome throughout the whole process. Transparency during the process. What I mean by that is keep them updated on where you are on the process. You know, say, for example, your hiring manager is out on vacation, or the next person this person has to interview with is going to be out on vacation next week. Don't just not respond to the candidate. Make sure that you're reaching out and saying, you know, we want to set up an interview with you. I just want to let you know so-and-so is on vacation. They're not going to be able to see you next week, but let's get something on the calendar for as soon as they get back from vacation. Let them know. Don't just have them sitting out there, or they're going to think that you're not interested. And they're going to find another job in the meantime. Again, we've talked about this. Make the application process easy. If you've got those entry-level jobs, do you have a resume submission process or an application process that's mobile friendly? Because a lot of those candidates aren't necessarily going to have access to a laptop. Is it easy for them to do it from their cell phone? Think of recruiting as a team sport. It's not just you in that silo. It's everybody within the organization throughout the entire recruitment process, throughout the entire interview process. Everybody has to be on board with what their role is. And again, that timely feedback, that timely communication, because if you don't have that, they're going to go, they're going to find another job, they're going to feel like you're not really interested, or they're just going to scroll on to the next job. And before you know it, somebody who worked a little faster than you did scooped up that candidate. This is another one that I think is an opportunity for you. So this is our chance to talk a little bit about pay transparency. 68% of employees say they would switch employers for greater pay transparency. It's coming down the pike. There are several states out there who now have pay transparency laws, including New York. New York's actually doesn't go into effect until sometime in September, but any job posting that a candidate from New York could potentially apply for, you have to let them know what a reasonable salary range is for that. And you know what it does when you post what the salary is going to be, it does a couple of things. It shows to candidates that you value fairness, right? You want to be fair. You want to make sure that there's no secrets out there and that your potential employees are going to feel like, okay, they know what they want to pay. They know what their budget is. They're being upfront with me about that. They're being honest. They're being open. If it's a secret what the salary is, there's an immediate sense of mistrust between the candidate and you. And again, the younger demographic in particular is really valuing that pay transparency. And that might be a tough switch for some companies who are really used to holding salary information very closely. So it's going to take a little bit of work on your part if you have managers that are a little bit reluctant to be sharing what candidates could potentially be making. And maybe they don't want to share it because there is some salary inequity within your organization. And that's a bigger conversation right there, because that probably shouldn't be happening anymore at this point. So it being transparent, open, upfront with your candidates, it also says something to your current employees as far as, hey, they're going to be bringing people in. I don't have to be concerned that they're going to be paying a whole lot more for the candidates coming in the door. I know exactly what they're going to be paying them. And yeah, you may have to come out and address it with some of your current employees. So again, this is one of those topics we could talk for an hour on. I'm not going to, but I'm just kind of saying, look at being transparent with your pay as an opportunity to kind of get ahead of the curve. My guess is in the next couple of years, Vermont is probably going to pass some sort of a pay transparency laws as well. So this is your chance to get out there. It also apparently works well with algorithms on things on job boards like Indeed, because sometimes these job boards, if there's no salary on a job posting, they kind of equate that to other job postings and what their pay is, and they'll assign a pay to it. And you don't want that either. Some candidates, if there's no salary on there, they're not even going to look at your posting. So again, I think starting to move in that direction of pay transparency is definitely the way to go. Again, optimizing your tools, your technology, this is basically what you need to do. You need to be communicating with your candidates all the way through. I think it's helpful if you can establish templates for your managers to be somewhat consistent through the interview process. If there are certain things that you want your managers to be discussing with employees, maybe you can develop a handful of interview questions that are going to hit on some of the things that you value as an employer. Maybe a couple of questions that are going to ask them about their integrity or their work ethic, and training your managers to say, hey, work ethic is really important to us. And then leading into a couple of standardized questions for them. So that can be really helpful. I think your leadership team might actually appreciate you giving them that sort of guidance. And then being able to measure your whole process. Take a look at your candidates. How long does it take start to finish for them to get through the interview process? How many candidates that get to stage 2 of interviewing actually get a job offer and accept the job offer? What's your turnover rate among recent hires? There's a lot of metrics that you can measure for the success of your overall recruitment plan. So I kind of look at as this is an evolution. Most of you probably have some sort of a foundational recruitment process in place, but you want to be moving up to that strategic level, because once you get to that strategic level, it does give you a competitive advantage over some of the other organizations that are still looking at it as our recruitment process is transactional. So that's where you want to move to. So I don't know if anybody wants to share. Feel free to unmute yourself or type it into the chat. Where do you think your department's currently operating, and what do you see as what you need to do to get to that next level? Anybody want to unmute and share? Or type into the chat? It's helpful to everybody if we can hear your story. Anything that you want to take on? Okay, we're being shy. That's okay. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah,
Oh.
just to share something. So what you're touching on in the beginning, one of the big things, and I know Susan, you and I have talked about this, is I have been instituting all job descriptions, that we need to update an accurate job description for all positions. I've created a job requisition form.
Great.
I am creating some hiring SOPs and some standardized interviewing questions. I guess I would say maybe like, I was curious for other people, what parts of the HR, onboarding recruiting process are we better off arranging, and what things are the managers better off doing? I think because I have some technical roles in human services, and I can certainly understand there's some technical things that they need to evaluate for, but just trying to understand what that mix should kind of be, because when I find if I give them too much, then sometimes we lose candidates because the managers don't follow up with them fast enough on certain things.
Any thoughts? Any thoughts to share with Michelle?
Yeah, I had one. One of the things that we did recently was create an orientation checklist, and it has multiple sort of assigned responsibilities. So some of it is HR, people and culture, some of it's the manager, some of it's some of different employees or in the company. But what we've done is we sort of present that to our new hires on day one and say, this is going to be a 2 to 3 month process. But these are the people that you're going to want to make sure you follow up with, because these people are on tap for giving you this XYZ training. Of course, we've told all the people who have accountabilities on that list ahead of time, but it puts a little bit more of the onus in the employee's hands, so that they can be advocating for their own development. So it's just a different way, kind of a different way, because people and then the idea is that within a month, we'll circle back, look at that orientation and see if they need any help sort of facilitating some of that learning.
Yeah, I think that's great, Mary. And I love the thought of circling back. I just can't overstate the importance of getting back to employees once they're on board and checking in and seeing how it's all going.
Yeah. The other thing that we do that we started doing about a year ago, because I was just so tired of doing exit interviews. I said, well, we should put more focus on stay interviews. So within a month, between 4 and 6 weeks of a new employee, I sit down with them and sort of ask a lot of the same questions that you'd ask about at an exit interview, like, how's your training been? Are you do you feel welcomed, and are you aware of this, and do you have questions about that, just to make sure that we haven't lost them in the busy first month they've been here. And that's been pretty good, because people feel like, wow, a lot of times I hear, no one's ever asked me these questions, that is so good, and they get very engaged and they feel that we care about them, which is the intent.
Yep, that's great. And I will just add to that, that word gets out when you're treating employees that way. It's amazing how many of them will be more likely to be talking to their friends and saying, I kind of like working there. It helps. It helps.
I would add, this is Melissa from Du Bois and King. I would add, we also have a mentor program, which after somebody's hired and they start, we assign each person a mentor who is in, the intent is for that person to not be within their departments or their immediate people, their immediate colleagues, so that they start to get to know someone else in the organization and other people's perspectives, not just within their immediate group. And I think it's had, I'll say, moderate success. I think we're still struggling for, everybody's so crazy busy. It's hard for people to have enough time to devote, remember to take care of your mentee kind of
Mhm.
thing. But so we're working on that a little bit more, I think, but I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think so
Recommend it.
too. I think anything that gives the new employee connection to the organization. It's a big key.
Exactly.
Any other thoughts? Anything anybody would like to share? Any initiatives they've taken? I know we're at the 10 o'clock mark. We're actually
I have
2 minutes
one
over.
quick question. This is
Mhm.
Deb.
Hi, Deb.
One of the questions that, one of the things that come up for us is, you want the interview process to be engaging, you want it to be interactive, but yet we've used the same questions for like the past 10 years. Because I think part of it is you want to make sure that you're not asking something that you're not supposed to be asking. Like, you don't want to ask something personal, but yet you want to find out about them. Like, there's kind of that fine line.
Mhm.
And I don't, that's one of our challenges, is we've said, how can we update the questions, but yet not cross over any lines and still be respectful? And so that's a question that is coming up.
Yeah, and I think if you can rework the questions, but ask them in a way where you're asking them to share work experiences, maybe as opposed to personal experiences. If you don't want to cross that personal line too much, I agree it's a little bit of a fine line because you want to get to know the candidate, but you don't want to pry into something that isn't job related. And I think if you can phrase the questions in a way that maybe gives the candidate the opportunity to share in either a personal level or a work level, so that then you're kind of leaving it up to them how much they'd like to share. And just bear in mind that if they're sharing things that are personal, you have to be very careful that if it's sharing anything that might give you pause to hire that person, that you're looking at it from a purely job related standpoint.
Right. Yeah, no, that definitely is a challenge when people overshare. You're like, okay, thank you for like.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if they have shared the difficulties that they've had in finding childcare, don't let that dissuade you from hiring them because you're afraid that
Right.
they're never going to come to work because their childcare is falling through.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, you have to be careful. I think the real caution is, how do you use that information?
Right.
Yeah, but I would definitely agree that it's probably time to update the questions. And make sure that you're asking thought-provoking, the open-ended questions and questions that are going to give you the insight into that person and how they're going to function in this job. So yes, ask about skills, that's fine, but try to get at those soft skills that are going to be really important.
Is there any websites or resources that anybody could think of that would be a great starting point?
Are you a member of SHRM?
I've never heard of it.
Oh, Society for Human Resources Management has a lot of online tools. I think if you just search interview questions, you'd be surprised at what pops up from a lot of different organizations. And you can get a lot of good suggestions online. People have.
I'm like, how much of them are crossing barriers? Do I have to run it through our HR attorney is what I'm just wondering. But
Well,
yes, thank you.
Might help though. Anybody have any other thoughts or suggestions or questions before we wrap up?
I was just going to respond to that last question about the, I think if you create a behavioral based question, then you're going to be pretty safe. And those are
Good
just
point.
questions that draw on a specific aspect and talk about people's past experience in a job. Yeah, those are all legal.
Yes.
Susan, I had a couple of things.
you.
You know, when you're
Okay.
talking about from a recruiting standpoint and from a trying to brand your organization and stuff. I mean, if you haven't really thought of it or heard of it, you know, the best places to work. When I used to do my recruiting, that was such a huge piece. Was going through that whole process and trying to be one of the best places to work because you have that as part of your branding. And you would be surprised at how many candidates look for that. And the other thing that I tried to do was on a recruiting tab that I used to have, I had a video made, and I had it made by employees of the organization, not just senior level, but manufacturing employees. I mean, and just talk about what their experience was, you know, what was good about the organization, what wasn't, you know, I mean, you want to have it all out there. So you're forthcoming with the information for them.
Right.
The other thing that I've done was say that you're in the hiring process and you have 2 or 3 candidates that are really good and you just don't know and you want to know them more on a personal level and get them outside of the you know, the big table conferencing kind of environment. Take them to lunch. Just take them to lunch, go and have a conversation with them, you know, just more, make it personal. I mean, not personal as in digging into personal information, but just, I guess, yeah, make it more personal, like you care. You know, you're showing those pieces of information. I mean, you don't need to go by yourself. I mean, take that hiring manager with you. Sometime, I mean, that shows that your interest, it shows you care about your people. I mean, so those are a couple of things that I've done back when I was recruiting.
Yeah, I agree. I think those are really great ideas and I love the video idea. Real experiences, testimonials go a long way. Anybody else have any other things to share? I mean, I understand if you have to jump off, but I think this is good information. Okay, well, there is my contact info. Feel free to reach out if you do have any questions. Again, you will be getting copies of the slides and a link to the recording. So please let me know if you have any other questions or suggestions going forward for other webinars that you might like to hear about. I am all ears. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.